James Callahan stood on the balcony of his sleek Austin apartment, looking out at the city lights that stretched as far as the eye could see. The skyline was a symbol of everything he had worked for, his empire, his success. Yet tonight the view felt hollow. Behind him, his phone buzzed, the same incessant notifications of meetings, deals, and calls from his investors. He ignored them, the weight of his own thoughts too heavy to be distracted by business as usual. His phone buzzed again. It was Lily, his fiancée. He glanced at the screen, her name flashing in the corner. He hesitated before pressing ignore. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He did. He just couldn't face her tonight, not with the knowledge that everything was falling apart. The scam that had stolen his company's fortune, the betrayal from people he trusted. The truth was too painful to share. The sound of a knock at the door brought him back to the present. Lily. She was home earlier than expected. He had told her he'd be working late, but she must have sensed something. There was no avoiding it now. He opened the door, trying to mask the turmoil brewing inside him. Lily stood in the doorway, her eyes filled with concern as she took in his tired, worn expression. "James?" she asked softly, her voice laced with worry. "You didn't answer my calls. What's going on?" James forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing, babe. Just some stuff to work through." He stepped aside to let her in. She didn't buy it. Lily walked into the apartment and set down her bag, her eyes scanning the room before returning to him. "You've been avoiding me. You never avoid me." Her words were gentle but firm, and James could see the worry in her eyes, the doubt creeping in. It was impossible to hide the truth anymore, but he had to try, for her sake. "I'm fine, really, just a lot on my plate," he lied, walking to the kitchen, avoiding her gaze. He didn't want her to see the panic in his eyes. She didn't deserve that, but she followed him, her footsteps echoing in the silence. "James, I'm not stupid. I can tell something's wrong. You're not being honest with me." She paused, her voice softer now, but still full of that unwavering concern. "What's going on?" The words caught in his throat. What could he say? That he had lost everything? That his world had crumbled around him? "Lily, please," he said, his voice strained. "I just need some time to figure this out. It's nothing you need to worry about." Lily's expression hardened slightly, the worry shifting to frustration. "James, don't push me away. If we're going to build a life together, we need to be honest with each other. You're hiding something, and I can't help you if you won't let me in." She crossed her arms, standing her ground. James felt the weight of her words settle over him. He knew she was right. They had always promised to be open with each other, to face everything together. But how could he tell her the truth when he was so terrified that it would drive her away? How could he admit that his success, his pride, had been shattered by a scam so elaborate he hadn't seen it coming? "I don't want to burden you with this," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I want to protect you." Lily softened at his words, stepping closer. "You don't have to protect me, James. I want to be there for you no matter what. But I can't help you if you keep shutting me out." The silence stretched between them. James could feel the raw honesty in her words, the love she was offering. But his fear of losing everything, of losing her, made it impossible to open up. So he did what he always did. He buried the truth deep inside. "I'm just tired, Lily," he said finally, his voice breaking slightly. "I need some time to think." She didn't push further, but the disappointment in her eyes was enough to pierce him. She nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging as if carrying an invisible weight. "Okay," she said softly, turning toward the door. "But I'm here when you're ready to talk. I'm not going anywhere." James stood in the doorway, watching her leave, his heart heavy with regret. As the door clicked shut behind her, he sank into the couch, the weight of the secret he was carrying pressing down on him. The scam, the betrayal, the lies. He had built his empire on the idea that success meant security. But now it all seemed so fragile, so pointless. How could he go on pretending everything was fine when he knew that the world he had worked so hard to create was nothing more than an illusion? He looked out at the city again, the lights twinkling in the distance like stars in a sky that was no longer his. His phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't check it. Tonight, the only thing he could hear was the silence of the life he had lost. James could feel the weight of the silence hanging in the air as he sat at his desk, staring at the flickering cursor on his screen. The numbers were all wrong. They didn't add up, and yet there was nothing he could do to fix it. The scams that had brought his company to its knees were so intricate, so well hidden, that even his best people hadn't noticed until it was too late. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to focus, but the pressure of it all was suffocating. Every call he made, every meeting he attended felt like he was walking on a tightrope, one misstep away from losing everything he'd built. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, letting the exhaustion wash over him. It had been days since Lily asked him what was wrong, and still he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. It was too much to bear, too much to share. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily. "We need to talk tonight. I'm worried. Call me when you can." James exhaled deeply. Her concern was palpable, but it only made him feel more guilty. She deserved more than this. She deserved honesty. But the fear of losing her, the fear of what revealing the truth might do to their relationship, kept him from opening up. He hit ignore, unable to face the reality of the conversation they needed to have. Just then, the door to his office opened with a soft click. His assistant, Emma, stepped in, her usual smile replaced by an expression of concern. "James, you okay? You've been looking, well, distant lately." James forced a smile, trying to shake off the anxiety that gripped his chest. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired, that's all." Emma didn't buy it. She set the papers down on his desk and sat down across from him. "James, come on. I've worked with you long enough to know when something's off. You haven't been yourself. Is everything okay with the company? With Lily?" The mention of Lily only made the knot in his stomach tighten. "It's just a lot right now," he said quietly, his voice wavering despite his best efforts to remain composed. Emma leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Look, you don't have to tell me everything, but I know when something's wrong, and I've been hearing things around the office. People are worried. They can sense the tension." James stared at the papers in front of him, trying to steady his breath. His employees were whispering. That was never a good sign. "She doesn't know, does she?" Emma's voice was soft but pointed. "Lily doesn't know what's really going on." James clenched his jaw, avoiding her gaze. "No, I haven't told her. She doesn't need to worry about this." Emma sighed, shaking her head. "James, she's going to find out eventually. And when she does, it's going to hurt even more. You know that, right?" The truth stung. She was right. But how could he tell her that the life they had built together, everything he had worked for, was crumbling? That the millions he had earned were gone in the blink of an eye? How could he burden her with this weight? "I'll handle it, Emma," he muttered, the words feeling hollow even as they left his mouth. "Just, can you handle things here for a while?" Emma hesitated, her eyes softening. "Of course, but you can't keep hiding this from her. She'll feel it. You can only shut her out for so long." James nodded, grateful for her concern but feeling a sense of isolation creep over him. He didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending. The weight of his secrets, of the lies he had to maintain, was eating him alive. As the day dragged on, the pressure mounted. More calls, more meetings, more reminders of everything slipping away. By the time he left the office that evening, his mind was numb, and his body ached from the strain. Lily's text lingered in his thoughts. "We need to talk tonight." She was right. He couldn't keep putting it off. But what could he possibly say to her? How could he explain that the life they'd been building was built on a house of cards? That night, as he walked through the door to their apartment, he found Lily sitting on the couch, her eyes wide with concern. She looked up at him, but this time there was something different in her gaze. It wasn't just worry, it was suspicion. "I need you to tell me what's going on, James," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I can't keep doing this. I know you're hiding something from me." James felt a lump form in his throat. He had avoided this moment for days, but now it was here. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Lily stood up and walked toward him, her eyes never leaving his. "You can't keep pushing me away. Whatever this is, we need to face it together. You don't have to carry this alone. Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He felt the walls he had built around himself begin to crumble. But how could he face her, knowing the pain the truth would cause? Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily, I've lost everything. The company, my savings, my reputation. It's all gone. Lily didn't flinch, but the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. James, why didn't you tell me? He shook his head, his heart breaking. I didn't want to lose you. I thought if I told you, you'd leave. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. James, I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together. But you have to trust me. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at her, the weight of everything pressing down on him. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to let go. He didn't know how they would rebuild, but with Lily by his side, maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to start over. The silence between James and Lily felt unbearable as they sat side by side on the couch. The weight of everything James had just confessed hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lily held his hand, but her mind raced. She had always known there were things he wasn't telling her, but this was far beyond anything she had ever imagined. James, she began, her voice steady but laced with concern. I need you to tell me everything. I need to understand how we got here. James nodded slowly, his eyes cast downward. The words were stuck in his throat. How could he explain the depth of his failure? How could he make her understand the choices he had made, the trust he had placed in the wrong people? I thought I could handle it, he whispered, the words heavy with regret. I thought I could fix it, but it all spiraled out of control so quickly, Lily. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to drag you into this mess. Lily's grip tightened on his hand. I'm already in it, James. I'm with you no matter what. But you have to trust me. You can't keep hiding things from me. Her words cut deeper than he expected. She was right. He had been shutting her out for weeks, thinking that protecting her meant keeping her in the dark. But the truth was, by doing that, he was only pushing her further away. Lily, He paused, trying to find the courage to say the words. I lost everything in a scam. It wasn't just the company. It wasn't just the money. People I trusted. They took it all from me, and I didn't see it coming. Lily's eyes widened, a wave of disbelief washing over her. She had known James for years. She had watched him rise from nothing to create something real, something powerful. And now, hearing him say that it was all gone in an instant, it didn't make sense. Who did this to you? She asked, her voice tinged with anger. Who betrayed you like this? James looked at her, his face a mask of exhaustion. He had avoided answering that question, not because he didn't trust Lily, but because the person responsible was someone he could never have imagined would hurt him. I don't even know who to trust anymore, he said, his voice breaking. It was Ethan, my old friend. He's the one behind it. Lily's heart sank. Ethan? The same Ethan who had been by James's side for years, the same man who had always been there for him in his darkest times. No, Lily whispered, shaking her head. Not Ethan. He's your best friend. How could he? James looked away, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't see it, Lily. He used me. He used everything I built to line his own pockets, and I was too blinded by loyalty to see it. He took everything, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't even protect you from it. The realization hit Lily like a punch to the stomach. The man James had trusted the most, the person he had leaned on for advice and support, had been the one to betray him. She could feel her heart breaking for him, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the anger rising in her chest. How long has this been going on? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How long have you known about this? James swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I didn't know, not at first, but I started to see the signs, the transactions that didn't make sense, the shady deals. But I kept brushing it off. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it right. Lily's mind raced. She thought back to the times when James had seemed distant, when he had started pulling away from her. Now she realized it wasn't just the pressure of work. It was this hidden weight he had been carrying, the shame of knowing that someone he trusted had taken everything from him. This isn't just about the money, is it? Lily said softly, her eyes searching his. This is about trust, and you've lost that too. James met her gaze then, his eyes filled with guilt and sorrow. Yes, I've lost everything, Lily. But more than that, I've lost myself. I don't know how to fix it. Lily took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. She couldn't change what had happened. She couldn't undo the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. But she could stand by him. She could help him rebuild, not just his business, but his sense of self. You don't have to fix it alone, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together. But you need to stop shutting me out. I need to be a part of this, James. I need you to trust me. The weight of her words hit him harder than anything else. He had been so afraid of losing her that he had tried to protect her by keeping her in the dark. But now, as he looked at her, he realized that the only way to move forward, together, was to let her in, to trust her, even when it felt impossible. He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I've been so scared of losing you that I pushed you away. But you're right. I can't do this without you. Lily smiled softly, brushing a tear from his cheek. We'll take it one step at a time. We don't need to have all the answers right now. We just need to be honest with each other. James held her close, feeling the weight on his chest begin to lift, if only for a moment. He didn't know how they would fix everything, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could start over, together. The apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of their breathing. James sat at the edge of the couch, his head in his hands, trying to calm the storm inside him. Lily was standing across from him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The tension between them had thickened, and he could feel the weight of every second stretching into eternity. She hadn't said anything since he told her the truth, but he could see it in her eyes. Questions, disbelief, and something deeper. Pain. She hadn't expected this. Neither had he. James had kept so much from her, thinking he could protect her. Now, with everything laid bare, he couldn't bring himself to look at her. Not yet. The shame was too much. Lily took a deep breath, her voice cutting through the thick silence. James, I need you to tell me everything, all of it. Not just about the scam, but everything you've been hiding. Her words were calm, but they hit him like a slap. The time for half-truths and excuses was over. She deserved more than that. James lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers for the first time in what felt like forever. Lily, I've been lying to you, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I never told you the whole truth, and I'm sorry. I should have come clean earlier. Lily's expression shifted, her face softening as she took a cautious step closer. James, what aren't you telling me? What else is there? He swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. The moment where the last of his walls would come down. The confession he had been avoiding for weeks. There's more to the story, Lily. The scam. It wasn't just business. It was personal. He paused, the words feeling like they were stuck in his throat. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the company. It was Ethan. Lily's eyes widened in confusion. Ethan? Your best friend? James nodded, his throat dry. Yes, he's the one who did this. He's the one who set me up. Lily took a step back, her hand instinctively going to her mouth in disbelief. Ethan? How could you not know? How could you let him? Her voice faltered, as if she couldn't comprehend what he was saying. James lowered his gaze, his voice barely above a whisper. I trusted him. I trusted him like a brother. We've been friends for years, and I never saw it coming. He was the one who convinced me to make risky deals, to trust the wrong people. And when the scam hit, he was the one who made sure I didn't notice the red flags. He used me, Lily. He used me to cover his tracks, and I didn't realize until it was too late. The room felt colder now, the distance between them growing with each word. Lily's face hardened as she processed what he had just said. Why didn't you tell me sooner, James? She asked, her voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and hurt. You kept all of this from me, and now I find out that someone I trusted, someone who was supposed to be your friend, is the one who betrayed us all. Why didn't you say something? James flinched, the pain of her words cutting deeper than he had expected. He had known this moment would come, but the reality of it still felt like a punch to the gut. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid of losing you. I didn't want you to think that I was weak, that I couldn't protect you. But I was wrong. I should have trusted you. You should have known." Lily stared at him for a long moment, her emotions visible in the way her lips trembled. She wasn't angry, not yet, but the hurt was undeniable. "How could you let this happen, James? How could you let someone you called your friend do this to you, to us?" James felt his chest tighten, the weight of his failures pressing down on him. "I never thought it was possible," he whispered. "He was like family to me. I thought we were on the same team. I never imagined he would do something like this." Lily's gaze softened for a moment, the anger giving way to something else, pity maybe, or understanding. But it wasn't enough. She still needed more. "I need you to promise me something, James," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "Promise me you won't keep anything else from me. Promise me that this is the last time I'll have to drag the truth out of you." James nodded slowly, his eyes welling up with tears. "I promise. No more secrets, Lily, I swear." She nodded, but the distance between them remained. They were still standing on opposite sides of the chasm that had opened between them. The trust they had once shared now felt like a distant memory, and James didn't know how to bridge that gap. "I need time, James," Lily said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to process this. I thought I knew who you were, but now, I don't know." James reached out, but she pulled back, her eyes filled with pain. "Please, just give me some space. I can't be here right now." The words stung, but he knew they were coming. He had done this to himself. He had buried the truth so deep that now, when it was finally coming to the surface, it was almost impossible to recover from. Lily turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps heavy as she left him standing there, a man broken by his own lies. "Lily, wait," he called after her, but the words didn't reach her. The door clicked shut behind her, and James was left alone, consumed by the weight of everything he had lost. He sank into the couch, his hands gripping the fabric as if holding on to something that no longer existed. The truth had set him free, but it had also shattered him. James sat alone in the dimly lit apartment, the weight of his recent confession still pressing on his chest. Lily had left hours ago, and the silence in the apartment felt suffocating. He could still feel the sting of her words, the disappointment in her eyes. He had promised to be open with her, but in the end, it wasn't enough. The truth had hurt her more than he could have imagined. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling him from his thoughts. The name on the screen made his heart drop. Ethan. He had been avoiding Ethan's calls all day, but now as he stared at the screen, James felt a sickening mix of anger and betrayal flood through him. He had already lost so much. What else could Ethan possibly want? He picked up the phone with a shaking hand and answered the call. "James, listen." Ethan's voice crackled on the other end, urgent and low. "We need to talk." James leaned back in the chair, feeling his stomach churn. "What is there to talk about, Ethan? You've already done enough damage." Ethan's voice faltered for a moment. "I know what you're thinking, and I don't blame you for hating me right now. But you have to understand, this was never supposed to go this far." James clenched his fists. "You used me, Ethan. You took everything I worked for, and now you want to talk?" There was a long pause, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. "I didn't have a choice, James," Ethan said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I was in too deep. The people I got involved with..." James cut him off, his voice shaking with fury. "You should have come to me. We could have figured it out together. You were my best friend. I trusted you." "I know," Ethan's voice broke, but James wasn't ready to listen to the excuses anymore. "I should have told you everything from the beginning, but I didn't. And now, I've lost you too. But I swear to you, I was trying to protect you in my own way. You can't blame me for everything." James stood up, pacing the small apartment, his thoughts racing. Protect him? Ethan had betrayed him, using their friendship to line his pockets. He had been a fool to trust him, and now the truth was clear. Ethan wasn't just a friend. He was a predator in disguise. You didn't protect me, Ethan. You destroyed everything. And now you want to talk? After everything? James's voice cracked. He could feel the rage rising, but beneath it was a deeper feeling. Disappointment, sadness, a profound sense of loss. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about trust, and Ethan had shattered it beyond repair. Ethan was silent for a moment before speaking again, his voice low. I know I can't fix this, but I'm trying to make things right. Please just listen to me. I know where the money went. I know who the real culprits are, and I can help you get it back. James stopped pacing, his heart skipping a beat. What are you talking about? You can't just fix this. You're the reason I'm in this mess. I didn't know the full extent of it, but I do now. James, this goes deeper than you think. There are people out there who are controlling everything, and I can help you expose them, Ethan said, desperation in his voice. You don't have to go through this alone. I can help you bring them down, but you have to trust me again. James felt the air leave his lungs. Was this a lie? Was Ethan trying to manipulate him one last time? He didn't know if he could trust Ethan anymore, but the words Ethan had said rang in his mind. I can help you bring them down. The silence stretched between them, and James rubbed his temples. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the phone across the room and pretend none of this had ever happened. But he couldn't ignore what Ethan had just said. There was a part of him, though small, though fragile, that still wanted to believe this was fixable. Why should I trust you, Ethan? James asked, his voice cold and calculated. You've lied to me for months. You've ruined everything I've worked for. How do I know this isn't just another one of your games? Because I'm trying to make it right, Ethan replied, his voice filled with sincerity. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I'm asking for a chance to make up for what I've done. Let me help you. We can bring this all to light, and together we can fix it. Please, James. The words hung in the air, and James felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He had trusted Ethan like a brother, and now he didn't know if he could ever trust anyone again. The betrayal cut deeper than he cared to admit. But the thought of exposing the people who had destroyed his life, of finally making them pay for what they had done, he couldn't ignore it. All right, James said quietly, his voice hoarse. I'll give you one chance. But if you're lying to me again, if you're just using me, this will be the last conversation we ever have. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, his voice breaking with emotion. I swear, James, this is it. I'm done lying to you. We'll fix this together. James ended the call and sat back down on the couch, his mind spinning. He had just made a deal with the devil. He didn't know if it was the right decision, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. There was a chance to make things right, even if it meant working with the man who had caused him so much pain. But at what cost? And could he truly trust Ethan again? The answers would come, but for now, James had to walk the line between redemption and revenge, unsure of where it would lead him. The door closed softly behind Lily as she stepped into the apartment. Her heart was heavy, her mind still spinning from the conversation that had unfolded just hours before. She had left James in a state of shock, a state of vulnerability she wasn't sure he had ever shown before. But what she didn't expect was that this silence, this feeling of emotional distance, would still be there when she returned. James was sitting at the kitchen table, his face in his hands, staring at the empty space in front of him as though he were trying to make sense of it all. It was the same posture he had assumed when he told her the truth, but now it was worse. Now it was as if he was not only carrying the weight of his lies, but the weight of his failure, the failure of their relationship, and the weight of the friendship he had once believed would never betray him. Lily stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. He hadn't even noticed her. His eyes were lost, as if he were staring into the abyss, waiting for it to swallow him whole. I'm back, she said softly, breaking the stillness. James looked up, startled, his eyes red from the earlier emotional exchange. There was a deep sadness in them, one that hadn't been there before. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words were caught in his throat. Lily, he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. I don't know what to say. Lily stepped closer, her gaze searching his face. "You don't have to say anything right now. I need to understand, James. I need to know what happened. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" James looked away, ashamed, his hands shaking slightly. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I could protect you from it. I didn't want to burden you with the truth." The words stung Lily more than she expected. He had hidden the truth from her for so long, thinking he was protecting her. But now all that remained were the pieces of their shattered trust. "You should have told me," she said, her voice steady but full of hurt. "You should have trusted me, James. You kept telling me that we were in this together, but when it mattered, you pushed me away." James felt the weight of her words. He had been so scared, so afraid that losing her would be the final blow. But now, standing here, facing her disappointment and betrayal, he realized that his fear had only pushed them further apart. "I know," he said softly, his voice breaking. "I didn't want to lose you, Lily. I thought if I could fix it, everything would be okay. But I didn't. I couldn't." Lily looked at him for a long time, her heart torn between anger and sadness. "James, you're not the only one who's been hurt here. You didn't just hurt yourself. You hurt me too. You hurt us. I trusted you with everything. You were my partner, my best friend. And now I don't know where we stand." The words hung in the air between them like a barrier, an invisible wall that neither of them knew how to break down. James had done the unthinkable, and no amount of apologies could undo the damage that had been done. The bond they shared had been shattered, and Lily wasn't sure how to put it back together. "I know," James said, tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't know how to make it right, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying." Lily's heart ached for him, but she wasn't sure if the pain she felt was from sympathy or from the hurt that had been inflicted. She had never expected this. She had never imagined that the man she loved, the man she had trusted with her heart, would be the one to betray her so completely. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Lily admitted, her voice shaking. "I need time, James. I need space to think." "I understand," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll give you all the time you need. I'll wait for you. I'll wait for as long as it takes." Lily turned away, not wanting him to see the tears she was holding back. She didn't know if she could forgive him. She didn't know if she could look at him the same way again. But she also knew that love wasn't black and white. It wasn't something you could throw away so easily. And maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what had been broken, but it wasn't going to happen overnight. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'll be in the other room," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just need some time alone." James didn't move, didn't speak. He simply nodded, understanding the gravity of what she was saying. Lily walked away, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor as she retreated to the other room, leaving him behind in the kitchen. James sat there, alone in the silence, the weight of his decisions crashing down on him once more. The love of his life had just told him that she needed space, and he knew deep down that he had no one to blame but himself. He had built this mess. He had destroyed the trust that had once held them together. And now, it was up to him to find a way to fix it, if it wasn't already too late. James sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the space between his hands, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. Lily was in the other room, and the quiet had stretched for hours. He could feel the distance between them, an invisible wall that was growing taller with every passing minute. He had told her the truth, but the truth wasn't enough to fix the damage. The trust that had once held them together was now broken beyond repair. She had asked for space, and he had given it to her. But the longer she stayed silent, the more he wondered if she was ever going to look at him the same way again. He had thought that once the truth came out, things would get better. He had hoped that it would be a wake-up call, a turning point where everything would fall into place. But instead, the weight of the secret, the betrayal, and the pain had only intensified. And now, he was at his breaking point. James ran a hand through his hair, trying to push the thoughts out of his mind. But it was no use. His mind was a constant whirlwind of guilt, regret, and confusion. How had it all come to this? How had he let his fear and pride destroy everything he had worked for, everything he had promised to protect? The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. Lily entered the room, her face pale, her eyes tired. She had been quiet for so long, but now, as she stood there, James could see the weight of everything in her expression. She wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way she had been earlier. Now, it was a quiet, painful sadness that had taken over her. "I've been thinking, James," Lily said, her voice soft, but it carried the weight of the world. "And I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. I can't keep pretending that we can just move past this, because we can't." James looked up, his heart sinking. "Lily, please. I know I've messed up, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I swear. No," she interrupted, holding up her hand. "It's not about what you're willing to do now. It's about everything you've already done." She paused, the silence stretching between them. "I need to know how much of it was real, James. How much of us was real?" The question hit him like a slap. It was the one thing he had been avoiding, the one thing that gnawed at him every time he thought about their future. Was any of it real? Was their relationship based on genuine love? Or had it been just another illusion built on lies and secrets? "I don't know," he whispered, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. I thought it was all real." Lily took a step forward, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "But it wasn't, James, not really. You built your empire on lies, and now I'm left picking up the pieces of something that was never really mine. I don't know if I can forgive you for that." Her words hit him like a blow to the chest. He had spent so long protecting her from the truth, but now he saw the damage that had been done. He had lied to her, deceived her, and in the process, he had lost her trust, her respect, and possibly even her love. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking. I just didn't want to lose you. I thought if I kept it all inside, you wouldn't have to deal with it. But I see now how wrong I was. I should have told you everything from the start." Lily shook her head, her expression softening, but the sadness was still there. "You should have, James. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for keeping me in the dark, for making me feel like I wasn't enough to handle the truth." James felt like the floor had been ripped out from beneath him. The words she was saying were like daggers to his heart, but they were the truth. He had treated her like she was fragile, like she couldn't handle the pressure of his failures, but he had underestimated her strength. He had underestimated how much she could have handled if he had only been honest. "Lily, I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could make it right, but I can't. All I can do now is be honest with you and hope that we can find a way to rebuild what we had." Lily took a step back, her eyes no longer filled with tears, but with a sadness that ran deeper than anything James could have imagined. "I don't know if we can, James. I don't know if I can look at you the same way again. You broke my heart. You broke our trust." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. James stood there, unable to say anything else, as Lily turned and walked toward the door. He wanted to stop her, to say something that would make everything better, but the truth was, there was nothing left to say. He had pushed her away for so long that now she was the one walking away from him. "Lily," he called out softly, but she didn't stop. She kept walking, her footsteps growing fainter as she disappeared into the night. James stood in the middle of the room, his hands trembling, his heart shattering with every second that passed. He had lost her. He had lost everything. And there was no way to get it back. He had come to the breaking point, and he didn't know if he could ever recover from it. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a faint glow over the apartment as James sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. His mind, however, was anything but still. The weight of everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the broken trust, was suffocating. But now it wasn't just the present that haunted him. It was the past. He had been so focused on the present, on the mess he had created, that he had never stopped to fully examine the roots of it all. He had ignored the warning signs, The moments when something didn't feel right, when the people he trusted most seemed to be pulling away. The cracks in his world had been there all along, but he had refused to see them. He had buried himself in work, in success, in the illusion of control, until everything came crashing down. But it wasn't just the scam that had broken him. It was the deeper, more painful truth. He had always been running from his past, and now there was nowhere left to hide. James picked up the phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed a number he had avoided for years. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, but it wasn't his voice he wanted to hear. It was someone else, someone from a time he had tried to forget. The line clicked and a voice answered. "Hello?" "Claire," James said, his voice tight. "It's James." There was a brief pause on the other end, and then she spoke, her voice a mix of surprise and caution. "James, it's been a long time. How are you?" "I don't know how to answer that," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "Listen, I need to talk to you. It's important." Another pause, but this time it was more deliberate. "Okay, talk." James took a deep breath. "It's about Ethan. I need you to tell me everything you know." There was a shift in her tone, a quiet hesitation. "What's going on, James? What do you mean? You know what happened with Ethan." "No," James said, shaking his head as if she could see him. "Not the scam, not the betrayal, the things before that, the things I never understood." Claire's voice softened. "You need to be more specific, James. I can't just give you answers without knowing what you're asking." "I'm asking about our past, about everything we tried to bury." His voice cracked, and for a moment he wasn't sure if he could continue, but he forced himself. "I need to know why things fell apart, why Ethan did what he did. I need to understand why I never saw it coming." Claire sighed on the other end, and James could hear the weight of the years pressing down on her. "You never wanted to see it, James. You never wanted to face it. Ethan, he wasn't always like this, but I saw the changes. I saw the signs when he started getting involved with the wrong people. He got lost in something bigger than he could control, and I think deep down he wanted to pull you in with him." James felt the ground shift beneath him, the weight of her words sinking into his chest. "But why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you say something?" "I tried, James," Claire said quietly. "I tried to get through to you, but you were too focused on your success. You were too focused on everything else to see the damage Ethan was causing, and by the time you realized it, it was too late." James closed his eyes, the truth hitting him harder than anything he had felt before. He had been so blinded by his own ambition, by the desire to build something bigger, that he had ignored the people closest to him. He had ignored Ethan, and he had ignored Claire. The guilt was overwhelming. "I should have listened," he whispered. "I should have seen it. I should have trusted you." Claire's voice softened again. "You weren't the only one who didn't see it. We were all caught up in the same dream, James. But now, you know what you missed. And maybe that's the first step." James sat in silence for a moment, letting her words wash over him. The past had always been something he ran from, his failures, his mistakes, his regrets. But now it was time to confront it. There were no more distractions, no more lies. "I don't know if I can fix this, Claire," James said, the rawness of his voice surprising even himself. "I don't know if I can fix what I've broken." She was quiet for a moment, as if considering her words carefully. "Maybe you can't fix everything, James, but you can start by being honest, with yourself, with Lily, with everyone who's been hurt by this." He closed his eyes, nodding slowly, though he wasn't sure she could see it. I know that now." "Then start there," Claire said. "Start by making things right. It's all you can do." James hung up the phone, the weight of the conversation still heavy in his chest. He had spent so many years running from his past, pretending that it didn't matter. But now he understood. His past had shaped him, shaped his decisions, his relationships, and his failures. He couldn't escape it, not anymore. And now, more than ever, he had to face it. He had to confront the mistakes he had made, the people he had betrayed, and the damage he had caused. But where did he start? How did he begin to undo the mess he had created? Lily. She was the first step. She deserved the truth. All of it. No more half-truths, no more lies. And with that, James knew what he had to do next. James stood in front of the mirror staring at his reflection. The face that stared back at him was one he barely recognized. There were lines of exhaustion etched deep into his features, a heaviness in his eyes that came from months of secrets, lies, and self-deception. He had lost so much, but the hardest part was looking at himself and realizing that the man in the mirror was the one who had caused all of it. It had been days since he last saw Lily. She had asked for space, and he had given it to her. But now, he couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. He had to face her, had to face the consequences of his actions, and most of all, he had to try to make it right. James had come to understand something he'd never truly grasped before. Redemption wasn't something you could earn with a few words or a promise. It wasn't a quick fix. It was a long road, one that would require more than just apologies. It would require sacrifice, patience, and most importantly, a willingness to confront his past, the choices he had made, the people he had betrayed, and the trust he had shattered. He grabbed his coat, took a deep breath, and headed out the door. Lily was at the cafe when he arrived. She was sitting at their usual table by the window, staring out at the busy street with a cup of coffee in front of her, untouched. She didn't look up as he approached, and for a moment he considered turning around, walking away. But he knew he couldn't, not anymore. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down quietly, his heart pounding in his chest. Lily didn't acknowledge his presence at first. She simply continued to stare out the window, the silence between them growing thick and heavy. It felt like an eternity before she spoke. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice soft but laced with something harder, something more painful. "I didn't think you'd ever really understand." James looked at her, his throat tight. "I'm sorry, Lily. I don't expect you to forgive me right now. I don't even know if you ever will. But I need you to know that I'm here. I'm here to fix this, whatever it takes." Lily finally turned to look at him, her eyes tired but searching. "How do you expect to fix this, James? How do you expect to fix everything you've broken?" Her words cut deep, but they weren't harsh. She wasn't angry. She was hurt, and that hurt had made its way into everything she said, every glance she gave him. James knew he had no right to expect anything from her, but that didn't stop the ache in his chest. "I don't know if I can fix everything, but I can start by being honest with you," he said, his voice low. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust, and I can't take that back. But I want to spend the rest of my life making things right. I want to prove to you that I can be the man you deserve." Lily's gaze softened, but there was still a distance between them, an invisible line that James knew he couldn't cross overnight. "I don't know if I can believe you," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, James. You kept so many things from me. You let it all fester until it destroyed everything. And now you want to fix it with a few words?" "I know," James replied, feeling the weight of her disappointment. "Words aren't enough. They'll never be enough. But actions speak louder than anything I could ever say. I'm not asking you to trust me right away. I'm asking for the chance to prove it to you." Lily looked down at her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't even know who you are anymore. You used to be someone I could rely on, someone I trusted with everything. But now I'm not so sure." James reached across the table, his hand shaking as he placed it gently over hers. "I'm still the same person, Lily. I'm just a man who made the biggest mistake of his life. And I need you to believe that I can do better. I need you to believe that I can change." She didn't pull her hand away, but she didn't return the gesture either. "I want to believe you, James, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can just forget all the lies, all the hurt. You've put me through so much, and I don't know if I can go through that again." The weight of her words hit him harder than anything else she had said. He hadn't just betrayed her trust, he had betrayed her heart, and now it was up to him to prove that he was worthy of it again. "I'm not asking you to forget," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you that I can be the man you need. I'm asking you to walk this road with me, even if it's long and painful." Lily was quiet for a long time, her eyes downcast as she considered his words. James held his breath, waiting for the answer he feared but knew he had to hear. Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes softening. "I can't promise you anything, James, but I'll walk that road with you. We'll take it one step at a time." James felt a wave of relief wash over him, though he knew this was only the beginning. The road to redemption wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be fast, but it was a road he was willing to walk for as long as it took. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me that chance." Lily nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also with something else, something that had been missing for so long: hope. James was sitting at his desk, the weight of the day's decisions heavy on his shoulders. The morning had been filled with small victories. Lily had agreed to walk the path of redemption with him, albeit cautiously, but there was still a lingering shadow that he couldn't shake. It was Ethan. The name alone was enough to tighten his chest. He had thought he was done with him, that he had finally severed all ties with the man who had betrayed him so completely. But Ethan was about to return. James had received the message just an hour ago, the one he had both dreaded and in some twisted way expected. "We need to talk. I'm in town. Meet me." He hadn't answered, but deep down he knew he couldn't avoid it forever. Ethan had been the catalyst for everything: the scam, the lies, the betrayal. He had to face him, if only to make sure he wouldn't pull him back into the chaos. But more than that, he knew the truth wasn't finished. The answers Ethan had promised, those that would make the pain of the past more bearable, still hovered like a dark cloud. A knock at the door snapped him from his thoughts. He didn't need to ask who it was. "Come in," he called, his voice steady but his pulse racing. The door opened, and there stood Ethan, leaning against the doorframe with his hands stuffed in the pockets of his jacket. His face was a mix of exhaustion and guardedness, but there was something else, something that James couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? It didn't matter. Ethan was here and he had to face him. "James," Ethan said, his voice hoarse as if the words were difficult to say. "It's been a while." James didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked over to the window, looking out over the city that had once symbolized everything he had worked for. Now it seemed like a distant memory, a reminder of the man he had once been. Before Ethan, before the scam, before everything fell apart. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," James said finally, his back still turned to Ethan. "After everything, I thought you'd disappear into the same shadows you came from." Ethan shifted uncomfortably but didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked into the room and pulled out a chair, sitting down. "I deserve that," he said quietly. "I know I screwed up, but that's not why I'm here. I didn't come to apologize. Not exactly." James turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Then what are you here for? You've already done enough." "I'm here to fix it," Ethan said, his voice taking on a more determined edge. "I'm here because I know who's behind all of this. I know who's really pulling the strings. And I need you to listen to me. We can't just let them get away with it, James." James's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? I thought you were the one behind all of this." Ethan looked down, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. "I was. But not by choice. I got in over my head and I couldn't get out. There are people, dangerous people, who made sure I didn't have a way out. But I've been digging, James. I've been tracking down every lead I could find. And I'm close to the truth, the real truth." James felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of anger and confusion. "So after everything you did, now you want to be the hero. You've ruined my life, Ethan. You've destroyed everything I worked for. And now you want to come here and fix it? I don't expect you to forgive me," Ethan said, his voice low. "I'm not asking for that, but I'm asking for one chance. A chance to fix this. A chance to help you expose the people who put us both in this position." James stood still for a moment, the words swirling in his mind. Could he really trust Ethan again? Was this another manipulation, another lie to pull him back into a game that had already cost him everything? Or was there some truth to what Ethan was saying? His eyes met Ethan's, and for the first time in what felt like years, he saw the vulnerability in his old friend's gaze. Maybe it wasn't all about the money or the power. Maybe Ethan too had been a victim, but that didn't change what had happened, what had been lost. now? James asked, his voice trembling with frustration. Why should I believe you? After everything you've done, after the lies you told, you've ruined me, Ethan. I know, Ethan replied, his voice thick with regret. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I've been trying to make things right. It's not just about you. It's about everyone who got caught in the crossfire. You're not the only one who's been hurt by this. James sat down heavily, his thoughts racing. The truth that Ethan was offering wasn't clean, wasn't easy to accept. But the more he listened, the more he realized that Ethan wasn't the only one who had been deceived. Ethan was offering a chance to make things right, but at what cost? And could James really trust him again? I'm listening, James said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But this better not be another game, Ethan. I'm done with games. Ethan nodded, his face serious. I swear to you, James, this is the last thing I'll ever ask of you. We have to take them down, together. The air between them was thick with uncertainty, but the possibility of answers, real answers, hung in the balance. As Ethan spoke about the people who had manipulated them both, James realized something else. He wasn't sure if he could forgive Ethan, but for the first time in a long time, he saw a way forward. He saw a chance to expose the truth, to find redemption, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been hurt along the way. And with that, James knew that the road ahead was going to be long and dangerous. But it was the only road that mattered now. James stood in the empty parking lot, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The meeting was set. Tonight would be the night they confronted the people who had been pulling the strings from the shadows, the people who had caused everything to unravel. The time for questions was over. Now, it was time to act. Ethan stood next to him, his posture tense, his eyes scanning the surroundings. James could feel the anxiety radiating from his old friend. This was it, no turning back. He had already walked away from everything once, but this was different. This time it wasn't just about him. It was about everything he had lost and everyone he had hurt along the way. You sure about this? Ethan asked quietly, his voice low and uncertain. There's no going back once we do this. James didn't answer right away. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. They had both come too far and there was too much at stake. This was their last chance, his last chance to redeem himself, to make things right. I don't have a choice, James finally said, his voice steady but filled with an emotion he couldn't name. We both know that. Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tight. You're right, but be ready, they'll fight back. James turned to him, his gaze meeting Ethan's. I've been ready for a long time. The door to the car swung open and they both stepped inside. The drive to the meeting spot was quiet, filled with nothing but the hum of the engine and the sound of their own thoughts. James couldn't help but wonder if Ethan was having second thoughts, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. He couldn't let fear take over now. He had a plan, and he was going to see it through. As they pulled up to the secluded building, James's pulse quickened. It was now or never. He knew that the people waiting for them inside were dangerous, ruthless, and had already proven that they would stop at nothing to protect their interests. But James had been through too much to back down now. The plan was simple: meet, confront, and expose the truth. There was no room for hesitation, no room for doubt. They walked inside, the echo of their footsteps the only sound in the cavernous, dimly lit space. James's eyes flicked around the room, scanning for any sign of the people he had come to face. Ethan, walking beside him, looked every bit the part of the man who had once been caught in the web of deceit. But tonight, he was different. He wasn't the same man who had pulled James into the mess in the first place. This time, they were on the same side. You came, a voice called from the shadows, low and menacing. The figure stepped forward, revealing the face of a man James had once trusted, someone who had been his partner in business, someone who had been by his side when things were going well. But now, standing in front of him, all James could see was the betrayal. We had a deal, James said, his voice calm but firm. You back out now, and you won't get a chance to make things right. The man, Maxwell, smiled coldly, his hands folded behind his back. You think this is about right or wrong, James? This is about power. You're too late. James's heart sank. He had always known that Maxwell was playing a dangerous game, but hearing him admit it out loud, brought a sense of finality to the situation. There was no more pretense, no more excuses. What they were about to do could very well cost them everything. "I'm not here for power, Maxwell," James replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here to make sure you pay for what you've done." Maxwell's eyes narrowed, his smile fading. "You think you can beat me, James? You think you can take me down with your little moral compass? You've already lost. The game was rigged from the start." James stood his ground, his fists clenched at his sides. "The game was never rigged, Maxwell. You were just too greedy to see that." Maxwell laughed, a cold, empty sound that echoed in the room. "You really think you're the hero here? You think you can just expose the truth and make everything better? It doesn't work that way. You don't know what you're dealing with." James's resolve hardened. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and tonight, it ends." The tension in the room thickened. James could feel the danger in the air, could feel the weight of everything that had led to this moment. There was no turning back. The truth was out, and now it was time for the consequences to fall. Ethan stepped forward, his expression grim. "We're not leaving until you pay for what you did." Maxwell's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "You think this is a game? You think you can threaten me? You have no idea what you're up against." James took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "I know exactly what I'm up against, and I'm not afraid anymore." A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. James didn't flinch, didn't back down. This was his moment, his final test. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed open, and a group of men stepped into the room. They were armed, their expressions cold and unyielding. James's heart raced, but he didn't move. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. "We have to make a move, James," Ethan whispered, his voice tight with fear. James didn't respond. He didn't need to. He had already made his decision. With a swift motion, he grabbed the folder from his bag and slammed it down onto the table in front of Maxwell. "You're done," James said, his voice cold. "We've got all the evidence we need to take you down." Maxwell's eyes flickered with panic. The walls were closing in and he knew it. The game was over. James stood in front of the apartment door, his hands trembling as he reached for the doorbell. The events of the past few days had felt like a blur. Tensions, confrontations, the fear of losing everything. And now, standing here, after everything, he had no idea how to begin. But this moment wasn't about the past anymore. It was about the future, about Lily. His heart raced as the door swung open, and there she was, standing in front of him, her face as calm and composed as it had been the first time they met. But there was something different in her eyes now. The vulnerability was still there, but it was tempered with something else. Strength, resilience, and if he wasn't mistaken, a flicker of hope. "James," Lily said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't expect to see you here." He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of everything between them. "I didn't expect to be here either," he said quietly, his words laced with an honesty he could no longer hide. "But I'm here now, and I need to talk to you." Lily stepped aside, allowing him to enter, but she didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with all the pain they had been through together. James felt it, but this time he was determined not to let it consume them. "I don't know where to start," James continued, his voice shaking as he looked at her. "I've said so many things, made so many mistakes, and I know I've hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me just like that. But I need you to know that I've learned. I've learned the hard way what really matters and what doesn't." Lily's eyes softened, but her expression remained cautious. "James, you've hurt me in ways I can't even describe. The lies, the secrets, the things you kept from me. I can't just pretend they never happened." James nodded, understanding. "I know, and I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm asking you to believe that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better, not for anyone else, but for you, for us. I've spent so much of my life running from the truth, from the consequences of my actions, and I'm done with that. I want to be the man you deserve. I want to be the man I was always meant to be." Lily looked at him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face as if trying to find the sincerity in his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now, more vulnerable than it had been in weeks. "I don't know if I can trust you again, James. I don't know if I can open myself up to you like I did before, but..." She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I don't want to give up on us. Not yet. Maybe I'm still angry. Maybe I'm still hurt. But I think we deserve a chance to rebuild, to see if we can find our way back." James felt his chest tighten at her words. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't an assurance that everything would be okay. But it was hope. Hope that they could start again. Hope that, despite everything, there was still something worth fighting for. "I'll take that chance, Lily," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take it, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I can be the man you need, the man you can trust again." Lily stepped closer to him, her eyes still searching his face as if weighing his every word. Then, with a small sigh, she reached up and placed a hand on his cheek. The simple gesture felt like a quiet promise, an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this. "I'm not asking for perfection, James," she said gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking for honesty, for openness, for trust. We can't go back to what we were, but maybe we can build something new, something better." James closed his eyes, allowing her touch to ground him, to remind him of everything they had fought for. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be without its challenges, but he was willing to face them, every single one of them, for her, for them. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it right," he said, his voice full of conviction. "We can start fresh, together." Lily smiled faintly, the corners of her lips curving upward as she took a step back. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. "A new beginning." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and delicate, but full of possibility. James felt a surge of emotion overwhelm him, gratitude, relief, but most of all, hope. For the first time in a long time, he could see a future that was uncertain, but one that was worth fighting for. He reached for her hand, and when she didn't pull away, he knew. They were taking the first step. It was a long road ahead, full of obstacles, mistakes, and missteps, but it was their road, and they would walk it together. This wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it, growing from it, and building something stronger. And as they stood there, hand in hand, James realized that love wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about showing up, about fighting through the hard times, and most importantly, about never giving up on each other. He wasn't the man he once was, but he was becoming the man she deserved, and that was enough.